Laura MacPherson joins us. She's the CEO of the Kangan Institute, Bendigo Kangan, and she's the director of TAFE Directors Australia, which is run by a very fearsome lady.
Yes.
Yeah, she's. You're here, Laura, to talk about workforce challenges in the TAFE sector and the implications of harmonisation arising from the Australian Universities Accord. And my eyes pricked up at least, harmonisation, because the Accord doesn't make a lot about tertiary harmonisation. It's mentioned a few times, but there was a general sense around the traps that this was something to keep TAFE happy and nothing would really happen and we'll just ignore it and go on as usual. Well, they were wrong. As chair of Jobs and Skills Australia, Barney Glover, who got mentioned before, he published a comprehensive paper last year on the immensely complex task of creating a national skills taxonomy. And last week, Jobs and Skills Australia produced another paper on a national skills system to include everything from formal courses right through to informal learning. And guess what? Barney Glover is also Chief Commissioner of ATEC. So he's in a position to encourage, in very heavy inverted commas, universities to cooperate with TAFE and the training sector in general. He's not the sort of bloke to give anybody orders, but in the compact negotiations, his colleagues may well be. This is a huge opportunity, I would think, for the skills system and particularly TAFE. The question is, are universities up to it and the universities game for it? But it gives, and there was another example, that's right. A couple of weeks ago, Andrew Giles, the skills minister, made the case for free fee, what is used to be free fee TAFE, it's just now free TAFE. He was saying it didn't really matter if people completed a whole course, because even picking up a skill, part of a course, part of a skill, that would encourage national productivity, and it would encourage their own earnings expectancies. Strikes me is we're starting to move towards a debate on skills rather than qualifications. Tell me all about it.
I think we can engage in a great conversation on that. Thank you, Stephen, and thanks everyone for having me here today. I do have a presentation that I might jump up and walk through as well and then return back for a broader discussion, but I think they're exactly the questions that we should be talking about. Skills, qualifications, and Stephen, I think you mentioned, that there's more in it for TAFE perhaps around tertiary harmonisation. Perhaps that's the case, but I'd like to, throughout the conversation today, maybe frame that a little bit differently and think about if we're putting the student at the centre of the learning and we're really supporting the workforce that's going to be needed and the economic productivity of our nation, perhaps there's something for all of us to be gained from that, and it's probably going to take every single one of us to be part of that journey and in creating a harmonised future for our tertiary education system in the future. So I think you've gave some good provocations there. I might jump up and talk through some of the things I wanted to share, and then we can return for a conversation. Does that sound okay? Great. I don't know if I have to turn that one off, Stephen. All right. Well, look, my name is Laura MacPherson, and it's a real pleasure to be here today. I was told that many people in the audience would be coming from the higher education sector, and so I thought I might just share a little bit about my journey. But before I kick off, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, and I'd like to pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that to anyone in the crowd here today, and online, as I understand this is being filmed as well. So probably the conversation that we're going to have today, and hopefully we get plenty of time to have that as well, it's something that we, and for all the reasons Stephen's just outlined, we believe that it really matters. The University Accord does ask higher education and vocational education to solve the same workforce problems together. It talks about access, productivity, skills shortages and social mobility. From our perspective, this isn't just about policy. It is about whether learners can move easily between school, between TAFE, between university and between work, knowing that line is no longer linear and hasn't been for some time. So how do we make sure that we're arranging ourselves to really support the student there as well? The higher ed and this sort of lecture theatre is probably quite familiar to me, and up until I entered the TAFE system in about 2018, my journey had been through higher education and post sort of master's qualifications as well. And in engaging in conversations with my husband about where our children might go, it was always very much focused around, yes, they will go to university, and that was the only pathway that I had known, and it was certainly the only pathway that was available to me at the time, or so I thought. Back in 2018, that changed dramatically, and I think having been in the TAFE system now and through the conversation that we'll have today, I genuinely believe that there's space and strength in all of the systems that we have, and that, you know, based on what the learners' needs are, the passions, and importantly what the industry and the workforce needs, is having a really strong tertiary education system is absolutely critical to our future. So I thought I might share a little bit about Bendigo Kangan Institute, because I guess I wouldn't mind just a show of hands in the room. How many people are familiar with TAFE or have been into a TAFE? That's pretty good. Excellent. Well, maybe I'll make this brief then, because you'll all probably know it very well. But Bendigo Kangan Institute, so we are one of 12 TAFEs in the Victorian system, and we have a network of colleagues in Victoria, but also across the nation as well. And I think certainly over the last couple of years, that network piece around whether that's in Victoria or nationally couldn't be more important, and it remains to be so. So in Bendigo Kangan, we are 4 brands, and we span across Melbourne and regional Victoria, but we're also internationally as well. So in 2025, just in terms of volume, we had 45,000 students that trained with us at Bendigo Kangan Institute, and expect that that's continuing to grow year on year. We've got 9 Victorian campuses and 2 under development, 1 in Sunbury and Melton. And I was actually just in Melton releasing the renders today, where we'll have a brand new campus opening up in Melton. Importantly, we've got about 1,600 students that are travelling at the moment from that area to access place-based training in other parts of the system. And so having a place-based TAFE there is going to be really significant to supporting the growth of the fastest LGA in Australia, I'm told. So we have also a Centre of Excellence that's opened in Cambodia. So we're really proud of our Automotive Centre of Excellence that exists down in Docklands. But over the last 12 months, we've been able to export that over to Cambodia, and we're now delivering earn and learn style products out of Phnom Penh in Cambodia, which we're really proud of. Our student demographics, approximately 60% are less than 25 years old, about 59% males and 41% women, but as you can imagine, that is still very gender-based, and we're doing a lot, likely with many of you as well, to really change that up and, you know, support more women moving into trades and more men moving into care, to the care economy as well. Partnerships are really critical to the work, and I'll talk a little bit about our partnership with La Trobe University a little bit later, but really welcome the opportunity to continue to work more closely with our university partners as well. I do also want to talk about VetAssess, because I think VetAssess is one of our brands that exists under Bendigo Kangan. It's the largest skills assessment provider in Australia, really talking to supporting skilled migration, and that's a deep level of expertise. And if we're talking about skills, organisations like, or brands like VetAssess are really critical to talking about skills and understanding where individuals are at in being able to contribute positively based on the skills, whether through qualifications or work experience, and how that can actually play out in the environments in which they are in. Oh, I forgot that I had this little clicker, so let me just move through. That's a little bit, and I know from sitting up the back that you can't see any of that, but I am happy for my slides to be shared as well. So in terms of BKR's role is broader than delivery, of course. We help build workforce pipelines, partner with employers and communities, and support system capacity as well. We focus our resourcing and effort on how we contribute to productivity, partnership and workforce readiness. And I talked a little bit about Melton, but we're also opening up a new campus in Sunbury, which will be online for mid-2028. I also mentioned a little bit about VetAssess, and as I said, sort of plays a critical role in Australia's skilled migration system as the largest independent skills assessment authority. So we assess over 340 professional occupations and key trade areas to ensure that migrants meet Australian workforce standards. So from 26 to 27, migration programs remain strongly skills focused, with around 70% of places allocated to the skilled stream. So we support workforce shortages and reliance on migration for productivity and economic growth. We know that sort of current migration trends show a shift towards a more targeted employer-aligned system with increased emphasis on employer-sponsored migration, onshore applicants and priority sectors such as healthcare, construction, technology and education. So nationally and here in Victoria, the policy direction is shifting towards a more joined-up tertiary system, and I think, Stephen, you mentioned that just before. We also know that approximately 87% of new workers in the coming decade will need a post-secondary school qualification. This is going to require us to make considerable changes to the way we operate and how we are integrated for us to unlock the future productivity needed for our economy. The establishment of the Australian Tertiary Education Committee is a major signal of that reform agenda. Investment continues to be focused in priority training areas such as housing, care, clean energy and critical workforce sectors. The National Skills Agreement is funding 20 TAFE Centres of Excellence nationally, including 4 in Victoria. If you're not familiar with these yet, I really do encourage and happy to share further information. We see the the Centres of Excellence that will be happening in Victoria, but as well as nationally, being really critical to innovation, to partnerships, to applied research, and really working closely on how do we solve for some of these new and emerging sectors, whether they're in AI, whether they're in new methods of construction, whether they're in the care economy or other critical sectors. How do we make sure that we're supporting and being creative and innovative in the way that we support the workforce for the future? I also just wanted to call out that the photo on the right-hand side here, it's a cohort of third-year University of New South Wales, and I think I heard that we had colleagues here from University of New South Wales, electrical engineering students. So they joined our Automotive Centre of Excellence, which I just mentioned before, in March to undertake electrical vehicle training. And we're exploring how that partnership can be expanded. So we see that quite a bit where there are, I guess, students coming in and getting those skill sets that they might need that really supports them and complements the work that they might be doing at the bachelor or the post-bachelor level. I wanted to highlight 3 areas that demonstrate the strength of TAFE in this slide. So firstly, workforce need. When we look at the future workforce in Victoria, according to the Victorian Skills Authority, nearly half of all new jobs over the next 10 years are aligned to vocational education. This is being driven by workforce shifts to support the clean energy transition, as well as construction and the care economy. As an example of how we're seeing the workforce needs at BKI, enrolments at our Health and Community Centre of Excellence, which is at our Broadmeadow campus, and was in the tune of about a $60 million build only about 18 months ago, probably about $100 million in today's dollars, is really state of the art. We have more than doubled our student numbers from 2024 to 2026, and we're projecting significantly more growth next year as well. Learning journey. We support access to education for some students from the start of their education journey, including basic English skills, right through to students who go on to do further study at university. And as I said before, we know that this isn't linear, and students are going to tap in and tap out of different systems at different points in time to get the skills that they need to support them in their career journey. I would also note that there are significant university college students entering the TAFE system, and I think we need to do some more work to actually quantify and measure how that is actually occurring to inform the conversations that we're having. This conversation matters to higher education too. The future workforce will need blended skills, and I'm sure you're hearing that in the conversations that you're having with students as well as your industry partners. Clearer pathways and more flexible progression across sectors as well. Outcomes. Most importantly, and this is recent research that has been undertaken by the Victorian TAFE Association, with a strong focus on completions, and completions remain important, but what also matters is that 91% of students that enrol at TAFE improve their employment outcomes as a result of entering into the TAFE system. So that includes partial completers as well. And what we see from our data is that many students will exit TAFE, and I'm sure in the university system as well, for really good reasons such as employment. And so what we're seeing in the data is showing us that tapping in and tapping out of the systems is significantly support students to get the jobs that they need, take those skills, and we need to make it easy for them to do that. In terms of tertiary harmonisation, our approach to make harmonisation practical, and we've been talking quite a lot at our organisation around practical examples that show tertiary harmonisation in practice, and I want to share a few of those with you today. So we have articulation agreements, as most TAFEs and universities do, with a number of Victorian universities, to make the system easier for students and to give them confidence around what they can expect if they're enrolling in TAFE and how they might articulate into further education. But we do need to make this easier, and we also need to make it consistent for students, as well as the TAFE and the university providers at the end of that as well. Similarly, we work with schools across Melbourne and regional Victoria to not only make the jump to tertiary education as seamless as possible, but also that the students are exposed to a range of course areas. Harmonisation is not only a student question, it is also a workforce mobility question for the tertiary sector. Our La Trobe partnership, and a partnership with Salesian College that I'll talk about shortly. So it is these partnerships that show how harmonisation is happening at BKI in practice, and there'd be many more examples around the network, I'm sure. La Trobe University is BKI's primary university partner, with collaboration centred on pathways and BKI's Health and Community Centre of Excellence. And this enables guaranteed entry and credit recognition across qualifications in health, community services, early childhood, accounting and business, arts and cybersecurity. I'm really proud of our partnership with La Trobe and working with Theo over at La Trobe University. There's a real connection around how can we, what's possible, how do we collaborate, how do we solve problems, and how do we try things a little bit differently, particularly around some of the delivery that we might do out at Health and Community Centre of Excellence, looking at our students that are enrolled in the enrolled nursing qualification, how they may be able to continue in the same environment and continue on to their bachelor's. That's already happening in the system, but there's ways in which we can collaborate across the infrastructure, potentially even across teaching areas as well, in supporting the students in making that easier as well. Yes, so another example that I just wanted to share is around our partnership with Salesian College in Sunbury. So we're about to commence construction of our new $25 million campus in Sunbury. The partnership with Salesian College will enable what we have called our education ecosystem to really come to the forefront in the Sunbury town, making a significant difference to the community of Sunbury. So our campus itself will have offerings like education support, digital, hair and beauty, foundation skills, and then there'll be the student supports that you'd expect to wrap around that. However, what we are working with Salesian College is to have our trades delivered out of their trades purpose-built centre that is actually going to be on Salesian College grounds, supporting not only their students, but looking at how that might support the broader ecosystem and region of Sunbury as well. And so again, working with the team at Salesian College is innovative, it's collaborative, and I think at the heart of these is around partnerships and a willingness to want to do differently, all for the same purpose and for the betterment of the students, industry and community at the end of the day. I was asked to talk a little bit about, I guess, the workforce challenges, and I'll touch on this slightly, but it's needless to say, yes, we have our workforce challenges in recruiting our own workforce, and I'm sure that's quite similar in the higher education sector as well, where we see that there's a demand for there's skill shortages that exist out in the system. Well, by the very nature of competency-based and TAFE, our teachers come from industry, and so when we're trying to recruit from the same pool where there's critical shortages in those sectors, then we do run into problems. But we do believe that the value proposition is significantly there. And as I make my way around campuses and I talk to our educators, and I'm sure that's the same for many educators in the higher ed sector, people really come in for purpose. And our purpose is around changing lives through the value of skills and education. And so there is a value proposition about giving back and around that legacy and around supporting and having an even greater impact in sharing your knowledge, skills and technical expertise and having an even greater impact. And I'd like to think that into the future and perhaps through the harmonisation work, that there's more opportunities in us to actually collaborate and work together around our workforce needs and challenges across the tertiary education system. Food for thought, and perhaps a good way to enter into the discussion that we might have And these are by no means full, because I'm really interested to hear from the views in the room as well. But from our perspective, our focus is on putting the student at the centre of what we do, and that's really, really important. And we do that to ensure there is the biggest impact for these individuals, their employees and the communities as well. And I think as we lean into some of these opportunities, I would say, where I do genuinely believe that there is value to be created from a whole of economic perspective, that it's not just about the TAFE and it's not just about the higher education, but when we come together, what more is possible as a result of that? So what would it look like if we put employment outcomes at the centre of how our tertiary system works? Or a world where students study within an integrated system where it's really easy to move in and out and navigate, whether that's from schools to TAFE to higher education, and flip in and out as they need to really achieve their aspirations and dreams around the careers that they wish to have. And what cultural opportunities exist across our TAFE and university systems as well? Parity of esteem. How do we have the conversations where it doesn't matter where and what system you're going into, but it is around your future and those aspirations and ambitions that you might have as well, and what conversations does that unlock for people like ourselves in this room, but also for policymakers as well. So as I close, the future of our system will be judged not by how we all operate individually, but by how effectively learners move throughout the system. There are some great opportunities for us in Victoria and nationally to enhance harmonisation through our education models, through our workforce, and by having a shared focus on the learning and the student journey. So I'd really love to hear some thoughts from yourself, engage in discussion, but I think there's more that brings us together than that separates us. And I think the opportunity that lies ahead of us is how do we get curious, how do we get creative and collaborative around doing that work together. Thank you.
Thank you. That's 10 years ago, that couldn't have happened. 20 or 30 years ago, there would have been attempts. Nobody here, apart from me, is old enough to remember competency-based training in the 1990s when there was talk of extending it to universities. It was destroyed by David Pennington, then the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Melbourne, who argued that this would reduce medicine to a vocational skill. I mean, it was completely nonsense then, but nevertheless he won. But even now today, a lot of what you've said is still going to horrify a lot of senior academics because they see a dichotomy between skills and training, between education and training. I don't think it exists, does it?
Is this one working? No. Oh, thank you. Look, I think, it's probably not black or white, this or that. I think it's, leaning into those conversations and perhaps having those conversations that haven't been able to occur, and getting and building a better understanding and appreciation for how the systems work, the strengths of the systems and the actors in the system. And if we are, aligned on the purpose around student, around the role that we have in, growing the productivity for Australia, then where is it that our strengths can be dialed up? Where can they work greater together? So whether it's a skills, a qualification, whether that's the question, perhaps, or perhaps we can take it up and we can be, asking how do we better, work together to achieve those shared outcomes, and we focus on our strengths, perhaps not our differences.
Your teachers have to have a qualification.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, universities do not.
I understand. I could be a university lecturer, which is, quite concerning. But yes, no, that is absolutely right. Everybody that comes into TAFE, and that can be a real barrier. Every one of our educators, need to undertake the Cert 4 in TAE, so they come across as industry qualified, competent, experts in their field, and then need to undertake 12 or 18 months, depending on the study mode, to undertake this qualification. So yes. There are strengths to that, but yes, that is our system.
Question, Flora?
I think sometimes the lack of parity of esteem starts in high school when students get streamed into vet in schools tracks or ATAR subjects. What work can you do with schools so that there's a less of a kind of fork in the road and more a portfolio of options?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, you know, I don't think it has to be so distinct as that fork in the road, because we know that, you know, there's a long journey as we enter into our working life. So we work really closely with schools and individual schools, but as well as the Department of Education, to provide that education around what pathways and opportunities do exist. I think there's opportunities for us to use technology in a way that can get that information out to the people that are the decision makers, because it's typically not the students that are making the decisions at that point in time. They're being influenced from a much younger age, whether that's by students, whether that's by, you know, the community, whether that's by, you know, individuals that have taken their own pathway and think that is the only pathway, as was the case for myself until about, you know, 8 years ago. So I think we can do that work more so at schools, but I think we can work on the ways that we can disseminate that, and perhaps how we can also, you know, as individuals and community members, educate ourselves, you know, more so as well, and be having those conversations with our children, so that they're, you know, finding the pathway that's going to best suit them. I was having a conversation with my husband last night about our middle daughter. You know, she's only 10 years old. But, you know, she will have some challenges navigating the education system, and we're talking about how do we make that pathway really easy for her. But they're things that we're talking about even now. So how do we make that easy so that the parents can have that conversation? Because not always the easiest thing to do as well.
Recurrent theme today before you got here was a sense that universities are to an extent under siege by government. And politicians, and that certainly enrolment numbers haven't been great the last 2 or 3 years. Are you starting to see a return of interest in skills by TAFE?
Well, certainly, I missed a good start to the day by the sounds of it. I think what we've been seeing, you know, in TAFE has been, you know, growing enrolments, and I think we have seen, you know, that change. The policy settings have changed, and, you know, with TAFE at the heart of, you know, certainly the Victorian and the national system, that matters, and that's really important for us. Yes, but I think that we have definitely seen an increase in demand for skills. I think that comes from awareness, reputation, but also what industry are asking for as well. Industry are wanting work-ready individuals with the skills to do the job now, and that becomes really important as to how do we arrange ourselves as a system to make sure that we're hearing that and we can actually respond to that together as well.
You've got autonomy in Victoria to an extent that other states don't have in terms of your ability to have relationships with the universities. But is that the way to do it, or do you need a centralised approach at a state government level?
Look, I can't perhaps talk to necessarily how that works in other states and territories. And, you know, I think the way that the system is set up matters. But I also think it is, you know, the cooperation, you know, and the desire to actually work and want to partner together with universities, and universities with TAFEs as well. So, you know, I'm not one to take no for an answer typically, and I absolutely understand the systems and frameworks that we work within. But I like to use the term coalition of the willing, and I think that where there's willing, there's often a way for us to actually, you know, show a different, you know, outcome in some of these things as well.
A grand national schemes for a national-wide taxonomy of what skills are and how they are represented and how they are acquired. Is that feasible? It seems like a very big challenge.
What do you think?
I don't think you've got a hope in hell.
I'll leave that with you.
Sorry. Yeah.
It's me again. Sorry, I know I'm very annoying today. Michelle Gillespie. I have worked in dual sectors most of my career, usually on the university registrar type roles. Love the future of harmonisation, but daily deal with the barriers to making that happen around the different regulators, the different compliance, you know, requirements, even from a point of view of what I call the Bill Shorten model, which we all know isn't Bill Shorten's idea. We've been doing it for a long time. But it, you know, even just for a student to move from a TAFE qualification to a degree, they often have to reapply, jump through a million hoops to do that. We just don't make it easy, and I feel like we almost need to get out of the way and let the harmonisation happen. But I don't know how we go about doing that in the current environment. So I'm really interested in both of your views on how can we make this easier for ourselves to get there?
was going to do the same to you, Stephen. Look, I think that's, part of the journey that we've got ahead. With the University Accord, I think there was some real pain points that were identified through that work. I think the work of the ATEC and the work plan that they're starting to, pull together is going to need to focus on where those priorities exist to achieve, this harmonised state that we talk about. There's a consultation paper out at the moment that ATEC are, requesting responses on. And, it was really interesting to read through that. And there's a really strong focus on the student journey. And I think that's really important, because if we understand the barriers that are in place from the student's perspective, that then feeds into, well, what do we need to do to achieve that sort of future state? So yes, I think there's pain points and barriers. Some of that is going to take longer for us to unravel and to, make sure that we've got the policy systems and settings right to support that. And I also think there's things that we can actually do that are in our gift now that we're perhaps not doing as best as we can as well. And so I think let's start with some of that low-hanging fruit and look at what is within our gift whilst we continue to influence and make sure that we're making some of those broader, bolder changes as well.
No, look, I think that's entirely right. I think there's another reason why it will start to happen, that the two sectors will start to talk more, cooperate more, and in ways start to blend what they offer. And that's the market. Because now, for the first time, private providers, I don't mean necessarily private providers in TAFE, but corporates can produce their own training. They've been doing it now for 15, 20 years. And you can learn an awful lot about planning from Cisco, with a range of Cisco qualifications, and they have partnerships with TAFE and with universities. There are a world of Google certificates. Now, they're not AQF recognised, but they're out there in the marketplace. And I imagine there are an awful lot of 18-year-olds who don't care, because they don't know what the AQF is.
Can I just ask a question about the student journey, because you just were talking about that a moment ago. There's been discussion recently about whether we should measure TAFE completions in terms of course completion or in terms of getting a job, which is the right measure. That goes to the heart of that sort of, what are we measuring and what are we aiming at here?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I'm pleased that we're actually broadening the question beyond it must be completions, it must only be completions. So I think I touched on some work that the VTA have recently undertaken, which talks about students, whether they fully complete or partially complete, 91% of them improve their employment outcomes. And we know that a large majority of students that come into TAFE because they actually want to improve their employment outcomes. So 91% of them are achieving that. So I think that's, gold standard, to be quite honest. However, I think more conversation around what does success look like, and for it to be, one facet only is not going to cut it here. I think we need to continue to look at, student employment, completion matters, but there's more nuance to the conversation for sure.
But do you have to do that with universities as well? Like, if it's just a TAFE discussion, then it's still silos.
Welcome the conversation. Where do we start?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think this is going to be... There's a very short-term political challenge in all of this. What's left of the coalition will come down hard on when the Commonwealth Government finally releases some attrition rates for free TAFE. And the government is already arguing that part of that, it is not the actual diploma or certificate at the end, it's what you've picked up, it's what you know how to do. And that probably, to me, strikes me as the biggest challenge for everyone, is how do you, if not codify, how you get into the system this sense that you may not have a diploma in submarine building, but you've learned how, and you can document you've learned how to build a bit of the engine.
And don't get me wrong, completions matter, and there are many licensed trades and where full qualifications are a licence to entering into, certain jobs. So it is still really important, but it is, not the only question and not the only measure that we should be, tracking ourselves by.
I'm interested in your views on what the biggest barriers are towards a tertiary integrated sector. To me, the whole competency-based assessment stuff within the vet sector, the completely different approach in the higher education sector to their accreditation of courses is a massive barrier, and the funding differences a massive barrier as well. So I suppose I'm interested in your views. I mean, what's the biggest problem?
I think I would echo the things that you've just indicated, and the other two that I would potentially add is around consistency in pathways. I think that is something for us to absolutely land for students. But I think the other one becomes around cultural and the opportunity for us to truly have that parity of esteem, and to note that no option is better or worse. All options should be based on what's going to be best for students. And I think arranging ourselves around that and changing the narrative around students' options rather than one is better than the other. I think we've got to move on from that.
I think we'll leave it there, Laura MacPherson. Thank you very much for coming in.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.